Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I have someone very special with me. She is my oldest friend and is a US based psychologist. She recently completed her second master's in mental health counseling with a specialization in expressive arts therapy. Welcome to my platform, Buneshte.
It's wonderful to be here and see you again.
All right, Buneshte. So I'm going to move into my first question. Could you help our audience understand exactly what expressive arts therapy is and how it's different from just art therapy?
Thank you for asking this question. This is something that even I struggle to understand as I started my journey in this field. At the beginning, I thought both of these were synonymous because I couldn't really tell the difference between art and expressive art and arts-based, creative arts. And the more I learned about it, I realized that quite honestly, this is a lot of it is jargon and it's more related to different organizations that give you different kinds of credentials, and that's where the differentiation comes from. So expressive arts therapy, which is what I've studied, is studying all of the arts, whether it is dance, whether it is movement, whether it is drama, whether it's music, whether it's visual art, which is our traditional drawing, whether it's poetry or the written arts. So the idea is to be able to use all of these and to use them intermodally depending on what the client might actually need in a session, as opposed to certain specializations like dance movement therapy or art therapy that exist. So I would say the biggest difference between expressive arts therapy and art therapy is that traditionally art therapy encompasses the field of simply visual arts, and you will not find a lot of movement or drama related material in that, or that's not what the professionals are trained in. When you're trained in expressive arts therapy, you're trained in using all of the arts intermodally, like I said before, if that helps. And there are different credentialing bodies, the American Art Therapy Association, for example, and the International Expressive Arts Therapy Association.
Thank you for that, Buneshte. I think that gives us a lot of insight on essentially what expressive arts therapy is. Um, I'll move into my next question now, which has more to do with why a field like this or why a speciality like this came about, and what are the benefits of expressive arts therapy in the field.
I want to preface this answer by also saying that everything that we do in expressive arts therapy today, or any of the arts-based therapies, has already existed in communities long before psychology was even a thing. We have all come around to share stories that have made people feel better, that have healed people. We've come around to dance together. And you can find this in a lot of collective cultures or interdependent cultures all over the world, where they have actively used the arts to come together, to heal from pain and from sorrow, and to feel joy collectively as a community. So what we are doing today is simply taking from those cultures, and we're sort of formalizing it in the field of mental health. And it came about through the field of psychology. So Natalie Rogers, who was Fred Rogers' daughter, actually came out with her first book, The Creative Connection. And she came up with the concept of humanistic expressive arts therapies based on her father's humanistic principles, where she took them forward and added the arts to it, because she believed that so much of our communication is non-verbal. So it would only make sense to have that transfer over into the therapeutic space. Why should I force you to verbalize and have everything up in your brain when you could easily show me through a movement or through an art piece what you're feeling? And the focus that she put is not on the analysis of the art itself, but about using the art to speak to the other person and vice versa. So in that, even the therapist often participated in the art making process as a mirror, as a reflection of what they were seeing. So a lot of the communication and the therapy was happening non-verbally, either through visual art or through movement or through a dramatic enactment of some sort. That's where it started off. And then, of course, there was Paulo Coelho, Stephen Levine, Sean McNiff. These are all the people who formalized the field. Again, all of these things already existed. They gave names to these phenomena and these processes that they saw, and they went on to write a lot of books in the field of expressive arts therapies that we still use. And they're now visiting faculty in different universities. And I would say that this whole field is very recent. It started off only in the 60s. So we're a very, very young field that has taken from some ancient knowledge.
We find that the process itself can be therapeutic. But expressive arts therapy perhaps also helps people who don't know how to verbalize what they're feeling.
That is absolutely true, because there is such an emphasis in traditional talk therapy on verbalizing your feelings. Therapy can often be inaccessible to a lot of people simply because they might not be able to do that. They might not have had any training, or they might not have been in the habit of verbalizing their feelings or even thinking about the process of thinking, right? It's something that not everybody does. It's something that our culture doesn't teach us to do. Um, and yes, there are some people who simply cannot verbalize what they're feeling. So in that sense, all the arts-based therapies are way more inclusive, where they're incorporating different forms of communication and expression. So that's absolutely true. It has been used in early intervention with infants and toddlers in a family setting. Music therapy is a very popular one for that. Then it has been used for people on the autism spectrum. It has been used for adults with developmental disabilities. It has been used for the geriatric population who have dementia and Alzheimer's. So it really has a broad scope of application, and it can be used very well in conjunction with traditional talk therapy as well.
Great. I think we need more therapies that are accessible to people. This week we've covered depression and we've spoken about depression on my platform. I'd like you to talk a little bit about how expressive arts therapy as a modality would benefit people who have been diagnosed with depression and, battle it.
As with all mental illness, often the thing that can most help us is often talking with somebody. But when a person comes into the therapeutic space, they might not be ready to do that, or they simply might not know how. So I think in that sense, when you start a therapeutic relationship of with art materials, instead of sitting there and doing a bunch of intake questions that can seem even more intimidating, that can be a really beautiful start to a relationship. Adding to that, I think when somebody is suffering from depression or they're formally diagnosed with major depressive disorder, it can be very hard to even get to a therapeutic space. And often there are a lot of accommodations that expressive arts can make in that sense. If the person is able to come to the office, if you're able to do a session over Zoom like we're doing right now, but you can simply like hold space for someone. This is a very common phrase that we use in expressive arts, holding space, which means, like Roger said, just being there in the space with the person without any judgment and accepting the whole person as they are, right? Not expecting anything from them, because that then counters the philosophy of the humanistic field of therapy. So when you're in this space together, if you don't want to talk today, if you cannot talk today, if there's nothing that you can do, and you want to sit with somebody and you want to rip up pieces of paper, if you want to scribble, or you want to like use large swaths of paint to just paint something, if you want to paint an entire canvas black because that's really how you are feeling today, or you want to curl yourself up in a ball and sit while the therapist is holding the space for you because there are no words that you can find today. All of those things, even at the very beginning, can really help in building trust and the therapeutic relationship. And once the person is ready to move on from the kinesthetic and the sensory side to the more affective side or the more emotional side, and then they're finally able to express what they're feeling in words. If you're ready to take it in those levels, the arts can help you traverse all of those levels.
Buneshte, this brings me to my next question is, could expressive arts therapy be used for groups that are at risk as a preventive measure when we're talking about mental and emotional health?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is yes, absolutely. Most of what I learned in my program here is how to use expressive arts, and it almost always works better when you're in a group setting or a community setting. And I firmly believe in using expressive arts in the group setting as well. In fact, that is the kind of work that I hope I can continue doing in the future. The best, I would say, advantage of doing something in a group is that even as the therapist, you're not alone in the process of therapy, because within the process of the group that is happening, whether it's the artistic process or it's a verbal sharing process, you don't have to be the one who asks the Socratic questions. You don't have to be the one who has to notice what is happening. Because as group progresses, other clients and other members of the group will start noticing what happens to other members of the group. And I think that's a beautiful thing that happens. And Yalom called it being a therapeutic messenger. So often members in the group turn out to be therapeutic messengers for other people. And this is, I would say, exaggerated, especially when you're creating art. If you're creating a group mural together, if you're creating a fluid sculpture, if you're creating a movement piece as the group, everybody learns how to understand, hold space just like the therapist would in an individual session, and also be able to express themselves. And I think the other benefit of groups is that so many of our problems are interpersonal. They do not exist in isolation. So when you're able to talk about these things, move about these things, dance about these things, sing about these things in a group, you're also practicing the interpersonal aspect of all these problems. So you don't have to learn something in your therapist's office and then go outside and try it with other people when they don't know what's happening. You're already in that process with other people, and you're going to know because you're going to get live feedback from them. So I'm a firm believer in using expressive arts in groups, and it has a big advantage, I would say.
Very insightful, Buneshte. Thank you so much. This brings me to my last question in the segment is, Buneshte, what's the one thing that you do for self-care?
My own journey with self-care has been a bit of a struggle, surrounded by like, I'm not sure, do I need to do this for myself? I'm fine. And understanding that really it's an ethical imperative to keep my own battery at 100%, because I can't expect to help someone if I'm like running for the charger if my battery is at 1%, right? So something that I really like doing for self-care is getting back into the habit of reading. And I like to read fiction a lot. For a really long time, I didn't read because I felt guilty about not reading for studying and for schoolwork. So I just stopped reading everything. So I'm trying to tell myself again that I'm allowed to read for pleasure, even if it's fiction, even if it doesn't matter. So this entire little process and internal dialogue I'm having with myself is I'm learning to allow myself to do the things that make me happy without feeling guilty for not doing work things at that moment.
Thank you for sharing that, because not a lot of people like to talk about their own struggle with or their own journey with their self care, which I think is so important because none of us have it down pat. But this has been great, Buneshte. I want to thank you so much for coming here and for making the time and for talking to me. And I hope to have you here soon again.
Thank you so much. I hope to be back. And thank you for doing everything that you're doing and putting the word out there.